Friends, hope all are doing good. In our previous lecture, we have learned preamble of the Constitution, and today we have DPSP for discussion. DPSP stands for Directive Principles of State Policy. It is a very important part of our Constitution, and every year you can expect, or we are having 2-3 questions directly or indirectly from this part in your UPSC CSE examination. So it is very, very important. So before heading to DPSP in detail, let's understand what actually DPSP means. DPSP stands for Directive Principles of State Policy. So these are the principles that gives direction for what? For state policy, policy of the state. Or we can say these are the ideals or things state should keep in mind while formulating policies and enacting laws. That is a formal definition of DPSP. So these are nothing but directions. Directions that state means authority, should keep in mind while formulating policies for the country and enacting laws for the country. Let's move on. Actually, DPSP is mentioned in Part 4 of the Constitution, Article 26 to 51. And Part 3 of the Constitution consists of fundamental rights. You know the very difference between fundamental rights and DPSP. Fundamental rights is justiciable or enforceable by court of law, but DPSP is non-justiciable in nature. That means we cannot approach a court to enforce DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. Okay, so DPSP is mentioned in Part 4 of the Constitution, and Article 26 to 51 contains Directive Principles of State Policy. And the concept is borrowed from Irish Constitution. Directive I, okay, Irish Constitution, and Irish Constitution taken it from Spanish Constitution. Okay, then the great Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of Indian Constitution, tells or coined the term novel features, DPSP, as novel features of our Constitution, because it contains provisions. It contains provisions for socio-economic justice, socio-economic political justice to the citizens of India, of our country. So it is to establish a welfare state. DPSP can be directly related to the term welfare state, because the very idea is to establish a welfare state. Welfare state in the sense a state that has social justice, economic justice and political justice. Socio-economic political justice or equality. Right? Yeah. Then DPSP, the very definition is these are the ideals. These are the ideals the state should keep in mind while formulating policies and enacting laws. So what is a state? It is not about states in our country. State means legislative, executive organs of our government, state governments and central government, local authorities and public authorities. State means something having power or authority in decision making process. It is a part of the Constitution. It is a constitutional power. That is what state is. Hope you understood the very concept of the idea of state, right? Yes. Something who is having authority. Our legislative, executive organs have authority, public authorities, then local governments, local self-governments, all belong to the terminology state or the idea of state. Okay, then it's to bring economic, social and political justice to the citizens of India, to the people of our country. Economic justice, to bring economic equality, right? Financial equality. Never we can bring complete equality, but we can have fill the gap. Then social, related to the society. Then political, related to politics. Not about politics actually, it is about polity. Polity means our rules, right? Rule of the government, right? Okay. Then it is to establish a welfare state. It is non-justiciable in nature. Non-justiciable means for the establishment or for the implementation of directive principles of state policy, we cannot approach a court any court of law. That is what non-justiciable is. But fundamental rights is justiciable. If our fundamental rights got violated, we can approach either Supreme Court or High Court. Article 32 has the provision for writs. We have discussed the concept of writs in very detail in our previous class in session, and Article 32 gives the power to Supreme Court to issue writs, and Article 226 provides the High Court to issue writs. So these are justiciable in nature. These are enforceable by court of law. And DPSP has socialistic, Gandhian and liberal intellectual principles. But formally, in our constitution, there is no such categorization. Our constitution does not have classification of DPSP as socialistic, Gandhian and liberal intellectual. But for better understanding, we can divide DPSP into these three categories: socialistic, Gandhian and liberal intellectual. Socialistic, it's about the society. It's about the society, right? Some of the examples, like providing free legal aid to poor is an example. Equal pay for equal work is an example. These all bring social justice, right? Social justice, or these are socialistic ideas to bring equality in the society. Then about Gandhian, organizing village panchayats, promoting cotton industries, prohibition of alcohol are some of the Gandhian principles. These are included in the DPSP. And of course, liberal intellectual, like enforcing or implementing uniform civil code, protection of wildlife are some of the examples in liberal intellectual. So all these were included in DPSP, Article 26 to 51, which I mentioned in part 4 of the Constitution. So this is a broad classification of DPSP. We have socialistic, Gandhian and liberal intellectual principles. These were embedded in the DPSP. Hope you understood this, right? Okay. Then Article 37 gives DPSP fundamental in the governance of our country. That means it is fundamental. It is very important. It is not ordinary. You know the difference between fundamental rights and ordinary rights. Fundamental rights are very fundamental, that is very important, which are mentioned in the Constitution. But ordinary rights are not mentioned in the Constitution. It's made by a statute, right? Yeah. So Article 37 provides DPSP fundamental in the governance of our country. That is very important. These should be taken care by the state at the time of formulating policies and enacting laws. Hope you understood these points, right? Moving on. Let's see some cases, some important cases that is related with fundamental rights and DPSP. You know, fundamental rights is a negative obligation in the part of the government, or in the part of the government. Why? And DPSP is positive obligation. You know, fundamental rights restrict the government from doing something on the pupil. Fundamental rights restricts the government or the state in imposing something on the people of India or the citizens of our country. Like Article 15. Article 15 says there must not be any discrimination on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Right? Then Article 21. Right to life and personal liberty. So these cannot be violated. State cannot do much on fundamental rights. That is, these restrict the government. These fundamental rights restrict or limits the power of the government. That is why it's called negative obligation. That's why we say negative obligation for the government. But DPSP is positive obligation. How? DPSP says or tells there is something that should be done for the welfare of the people. Government has to do it, or government has the power to do it. In the case of fundamental rights, government has no power to do it. But in the case of DPSP, government has the power to do it for the welfare of the people. right? Hope you understood both obligations, negative and positive. Fundamental rights, negative, because state cannot violate fundamental rights. State has some limitations. State has some restrictions on doing something on the fundamental rights or violating the fundamental rights. But DPSP is a positive obligation. State can do many things using DPSP or in the context of DPSP for the welfare of the pupil, social, economic, and political welfare of the pupil. Okay, yes, mainly socio-economic welfare. Okay, let's see some cases, some important cases that are related with fundamental rights and DPSP. Champakam Thorarajan versus State of Madras, which was happened in 1951. There was a conflict between fundamental right and DPSP. Actually, the case was related with reservation in medical seat. We are not going in detail. It is a case related with reservation in medical seat in 1951. So Champakam Thorarajan, he approached the court, and the conflict was that Article 15. There must not be any discrimination on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. So reservation. There happened a conflict between fundamental right and DPSP. So the court held fundamental right prevail. Then in Golaknath case, which was in 1967, fundamental right cannot be amended to implement DPSP. That is, fundamental rights enjoy supremacy over DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. So, fundamental rights cannot be amended, cannot be modified to implement the concept of DPSP. Then in Minerva Mills case, one of the most important cases, which was taken by the great Nani Palkiwala, which was in 1980, Supreme Court held that there must be a balance between fundamental rights and DPSP. There must be a balance between fundamental rights and DPSP. These two are correlated. These two are correlated. And from these three cases, what we can understand is fundamental rights enjoy supremacy over DPSP. Right? Fundamental rights enjoy supremacy over DPSP. Some fundamental rights are fundamental or is fundamental, is very important, is mentioned in the Constitution. Even though DPSP are mentioned in the Constitution, they are not justiciable. When we got our rights, fundamental rights violated, we can approach the court, either the Supreme Court or the High Court. When, okay, let's see an example. If someone wants to implement Uniform Civil Code, he or she cannot approach the state or the judiciary, the court, the Supreme Court or the High Court for establishing it, because it is up to the state. It is up to the DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. State can do it, state may not do it, or state may not do it. It's based on the financial capacity, the policies of the changing governments. So it is up to them. That is why it is non-justiciable in nature. Hope you understood the very logic, right? Yes. Then we can see some of the institutions that were established on the basis of DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. One is Planning Commission, which was established in 1950, which established what, 5-year plans, right? Yeah, which has taken 5-year plans. Then land reform laws, and before that the land were, most of the lands were in the hands of zamindars. So after having land reforms in effect, people of India, the deprived people of India got at least the minimum land to live in, to have the livelihood. Yes. Then Legal Services Authority Act 1987. You might have heard of NALSA, National Legal Services Authority. It's an authority that provides free legal aid to the poor. Free and effective legal aid to the poor and deprived part of our society. Then Wildlife Protection Act 1972 is another example, which is to protect our wildlife, the forest. Okay. So these are some of the institutions and acts that were made on the basis of DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. So hope you understood DPSP completely, and we have learned DPSP by comparing fundamental rights. So it will be helpful for you to have more idea on the DPSP. Okay, so uh, let's rewind the topics which was mentioned in part 4 of the constitution, taken from Irish constitution. Then non-justiciable nature, the very important point is it is to establish welfare state, and these are the ideals that should be taken care by the state at the time of formulating policies and enacting laws. And we can categorize it into socialistic, Gandhian, and liberal intellectual, and we have seen some examples as well. Then some cases. So seeing these cases, we understood fundamental rights prevail over fundamental what DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy, or fundamental rights enjoy supremacy over DPSP, and some institutions and laws that were made into effect with the help of or on the basis of DPSP. So hope you understood everything. So see you next time. Have a good time. Take care.